You're listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.
Hi, it's Louisa Tanner Munson, and this is the 10th house, the 10th part of the Chiron Through the Houses series, where I've looked at what happens when you're born with Chiron in a particular house and what that might mean and how you might be able to transition and transcend through that kind of wound. And also what happens when Chiron happens to transit, i.e. move through your 10th house, what might happen. So the first thing to look at really is, what does the 10th house represent? And for those of you that have been listening through each one of these different recordings, you'll already know that the first, the fourth, the 7th and the 10th houses are like our compass points on our birth charts. They are the defining points. And in fact, when astrologers first look at a chart, they will usually see where the sun and moon are, what the ascendant is, and also where the midheaven is. Now, the midheaven is the start of the 10th house. It is the cusp. It is the space immediately between the 9th house, the end of the 9th house, and the beginning of the 10th house. So it's that moment in time when the attention shifts from higher spirituality into achievement and success. So it's one of those defining points of the birth chart. So that's going to have and carry some greater significance that we'll talk about if Chiron is transiting through your 10th house. That represents something quite big for you. Now, if Chiron is actually born in, if Chiron was in your 10th house at the time of your birth, then that also makes it quite a significant planet. Any planet that falls in the 1st, the 4th, the 7th and 10th houses are very important to the birth chart. They seem to have extra significance somehow. So the 10th house Chiron carries with it quite a strong responsibility. So let's have a look at the 10th house and what it covers, so we can start to drill down into how important Chiron is in this position. So the 10th house looks at success, public persona. It's like our highest achievements, the highest point of our self-expression. It's who we are out in the world. It's what we have, what status we've achieved, and our feelings towards status. It represents authority figures in our lives, our bosses, and our own ability to be our own boss. It also represents parents. Now, I mentioned when I was looking through the 4th house that there's a little bit of confusion between astrologers as to whether the 4th house represents the mum and the 10th house the dad, and vice versa. Lots of astrologers are split on this. I tend to think that they're both houses that represent parents, and I don't think gender is necessarily the defining factor. But the 10th house does seem to represent the parent that has the greater status, that is the authority figure in the family matrix. It does represent the parent that's most professional and who has the most worldly status. And it also represents our relationships to this person. So having Chiron in the 10th house can show quite a lot of insecurity and pain coming from your relationships with authority figures, in particular, often the dad, if that's how the dad shows up in your birth chart. Think about which parent is the most dominant, which parent is the most worldly wise, which parent is the one that has given you your outward smarts, your street smarts, and that's probably the parent that's covered in this. It also represents our teachers and our bosses. So it might represent that there's a certain amount of karmic pain to do with bosses in this lifetime. I have seen it come up in the charts of people who have relationships with their bosses and who enjoy playing second fiddle to a boss, or in a marriage or in a relationship that this person is very, very happy to be the right-hand man of or woman of a great person. So it shows a little bit of fear to do with stepping into your own greatness, in as much as you prefer to support someone who is great to become greater, and you get a little bit of reflected glory from that position. So there's all sorts of issues to do with authority figures, as you can see. It also can show a certain amount of pain and fear to do with your outward success. So it could be that success was so primed and prompted in your childhood, and the pressures to succeed and do well were so strongly expected and placed on your shoulders that you have experienced some pain from not fulfilling them, or not feeling good enough, or not feeling that you had choice as to how you expressed your brilliance, that you had it prescribed for you, and ergo the pain. It can also represent that you are really, really quite brilliant, but have some kind of self-defeating ability to stitch yourself up at the last minute. So just as you're about to receive something, there's some sort of pain in the receipt of success and receipt of the status and receipt of the wealth, that it always seems to just go wrong at the wrong time and give you a little bit of pain. So it's worth analysing your responses to success. Of course, that's at the lowest expression of Chiron, because Chiron isn't just about wounds and pain. Chiron is about transcending our childhood wounds and insecurities, and becoming a wise teacher through that. So it could also represent you learning to accept your status, and learning to accept your brilliance and that area that you're good at shining in, and taking responsibility for it and being responsible. So becoming a really gifted teacher in your own right, and finding the success from that. So there's a lot of different interpretations available for this house. Now, if the thing that really rings true to you is to do with a dominant parent and the pain involved from that dominant parent, it shows a certain amount of insecurity and pain in not wanting to follow in their footsteps, but finding it very difficult to assert yourself in any other way, that you've learnt your patterns of assertion and authority from the master. And so it becomes very difficult for you to find how you can have your own power, make it your own without perpetuating the cycle of bullying or the cycle of dominance onto the next generation down there. So I think we've probably covered some of the effects of Chiron in the 10th house. Just one extra one I would also hint at is, I see this in particular with the 3rd house and the 9th house, and the 10th house, possibly the 6th house as well, Chiron, is a fear and a pain to do with your ability to learn, a fear and a pain to do with your ability to achieve, that your ideas on what achievement is and what success is and what true learning is slightly out of kilter with that of society. And so you might experience the pain in the gap from what society wants from you and expects from you, and how you see your own success and want to define it. So, in between the gap between your expectations and the expectations of society and authority and laws and governments, all represented by the 10th house, there can be a lot of pain because you're not meeting the standard requirements, and at the same time you don't want to meet it, but in doing so you cut yourself off from being recognized. So recognition is a definite 10th house theme, and cutting yourself off from recognition is a very painful thing, but for some people it feels like that's the only option available to you to be able to live in accordance to your own value systems. So it's quite a big thing. So if Chiron is going through your 10th house, immediately before, Chiron would have been in your 9th house to do with changing and upgrading your philosophy and your spirituality and your thinking systems. It might have taken place just at the time of some very important travel, where your mind was opened to the way that different cultures live, and your mind was expanded from that. So as Chiron moves from the 9th house to the 10th house, and I've mentioned this in previous recordings, as Chiron moves, it doesn't just move forward, it sort of moves backwards and forwards over the same 4 to 8 degrees every year. So it takes a while to fully clear a point. So as it transitions from the 9th to the 10th house, you might find that you're going backwards and forwards between your expanded views and what that means to you in terms of your outward success and achievement and recognition. So you might be caught between the phase of acquiring information and understanding and synthesizing your knowledge and practicing it and expanding your mind, and then thinking, okay, how can I apply it into my professional career? How can I get some recognition from this? How can I become an authority and manage other people and manage other people's expectations with the new knowledge about the world that I know? So it can lead to a very, very different career. And so I would definitely see a career change as being a very highly probable thing that could happen as Chiron transits over the 10th house. And a painful transition, one that's not very smooth, one that feels like you have to do it. You have to kind of accept that who you are has changed significantly and your job no longer reflects who you are, or your outer expression is out of kilter with who you have become. So on one level, it could be about your job and how you are recognised, but ultimately it's about your self-expression and getting it back into alignment with who you are from having changed your viewpoints in the 9th house transit. So it's a huge shift in how do you get other people to recognise the changes that you've been through? Do you bother? Do you shock them? Do you just start living the new life and wait for people to catch up? So a lot of it is about finding your integrity and your authenticity and communicating it publicly, letting that go so that people know who you are and are very sure about who you are. So you become a leader in your own right. Chiron transiting through this house, I mean, obviously there's a strong link to parents. So Chiron transiting through this house can also represent pain and learning to do with a parent issue. It could be a time when a parent transitions from this life to the next. It could be a time when a parent experiences great anxiety and illness, or something happens to a parent that makes you rethink everything. Remember, Chiron transits often reawaken childhood pain. So, and it's not just to be vindictive or anything. It's so that you can awaken to the pain and move through it and move beyond it and learn from it. Remember, most of our childhood pain that actually rules the way we live is formed in the years 0 to 7 years old. Most of it occurs in that time. And so often when we're making judgments about our parents and our family and the way we were raised, most of those viewpoints are based on the 6-year-old self. So you're carrying the viewpoints of your 6-year-old. So it could be that during one of these times, as Chiron moves through the 10th house, you get a chance to reevaluate everything from an adult's perspective and upgrade your thinking. So if there is parental pain going on during this time, it is to help you really zone in on what's important to you in your becoming, in your evolution as a leader within the world in your own right. It could also represent you becoming a parent as well. So I did note that when Chiron goes through the 4th, possibly the 5th house, that it represents a time when you might become a parent. I can see that happening in the 10th as well, because it is about taking on extra responsibility and becoming a grown-up. So a lot of themes there. In the same way as when Chiron transits over your ascendant, your IC, your descendant, and now your midheaven, or in other words, your 1st, 4th, 7th and 10th houses, they are shifts that will never really leave you the same person. They are significant life changes, allowing you to move forward and prosper. So anyway, I hope that's been a useful little heads up. If you are awaiting your 10th house transit and you've got a certain amount of pain to do with who you are as a person and your output in the world and how you're seen in the world, then now is the time to start working on it, because once Chiron goes into the 10th house, you'll be pretty busy with extra responsibilities anyway. So it would be a good time to really get clear about what you want ahead of that, so that you can put all the stepping stones in place and then reap the rewards of working with that energy. Anyway, take care, and hopefully we'll catch up another time.
You've been listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson, and this recording has been made possible by all you lovely supporters at Patreon. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.